Cool. So you're looking into the blank void of the internet. You think, what? Where do I start? How do I find anything about this company? That's not it. That's not it. That's not it. But this is it. How would you know? Really, it's this one. If you guys know public markets, it's the CDAR page that's everything. Sadly, they won't allow us to update this to what it should be, which is this. And so maybe you've had a look. I ran websites for other public companies and kind of promised myself I wouldn't do it because I wasn't good at it. I don't know anything about web domain stuff and I don't really want to learn. Right?
Yeah.
But what we do have is a whole new generation of these kinds of apps for how to get stuff out there, right? And so if you check on the back end of this, you'll see there's like 50 or 100 different links that have existed through here over the time since 2021 when I did a takeover of this company the first time. So one of the things that has to be on here is annual meeting materials. So this is like a legal requirement that's supposed to be there. This is the link to kind of the mothership where we make all our continuous disclosure record with the government. And then, you know, my attempt at a disclaimer here to just kind of highlight exploration risk and stuff like this. Even from a biz dev perspective, this stuff gets missed. And it shouldn't. And typically it doesn't matter because most of these companies have bigger problems. But from a regulatory perspective, and even from an institutional investor perspective, there are institutional investors who have checklists and they're looking for things like, hey, do you guys do all your paperwork properly? Do you do this? Do you do that? Those can get pretty complicated. And a lot of investors in junior mining don't have them. But this is a pain point for issuers. Governance side stuff. And then so this mining exploration content, this is like the big bucket where we just put everything. And so one of the most recent things that we put in here was this spreadsheet. I made it myself. I would rather have a geologist doing this stuff, but I'm a mathematician, so I'm going to roll up my sleeves and get dirty and just do it. And so these are just a bunch of links to all the different data. And then through here is just all of our exploration results. So rock sample, there's QA/QC stuff as well, and additional kind of stuff about what these rocks are. Because when you start putting numbers out like 25% copper, people start saying, what are you talking about? That's not possible. And so rather than telling them that it is, it's easier to just show them. So this whole spreadsheet, there's like 15 pages, and it's basically me just trying to answer a shareholder request, which was along the lines of, great, Peter, I see the assays. They're really rich. I see the rock pictures. They're crazy. How do I connect them in my head? And so not having, you know what I mean? Trying to educate, you know, we've got hundreds of pictures of rocks like this, and we've got, you know, 100 geochemical results that are talking about XRFs that are really rich and 10, 20% copper. And so it's like, how do you break that information out and share to shareholders, show people? And so the YouTube videos are a big part of it, but the YouTube videos are a little cumbersome to consume in terms of content. You kind of got to watch the whole damn thing. And even after you watch it, you may not understand what you saw. So there's been some big gaps in how we've marketed this deal. And because I'm not a geologist and our board of directors doesn't have geologist people in it, the way we've presented it to the market is totally different. And so we've only now started to do like a deep dive into one deposit area and start to talk about the geology now that we kind of have one of these discoveries. We've been working on a bunch of different other areas and there's all kinds of stuff. And it's like, those are just half-baked cakes, half-eaten sandwiches. But this area here, this is the spot where we finally went and got permits. Everyone said, you'll never be able to get permits. We said, maybe, let's find out. And now that we do, it's kind of like, cool. So we're 2 kilometers from Highway 1 and 2 kilometers from a deep water port. And then, you know, how far is it to a smelter in Australia? Well, you tell me, right? Like that's a whole thing that we can get into. And so that's at the one end of the exploration content is this kind of deep dive into like, what are these rocks? Why is everybody excited about them? What do we care? And then at the other end, shareholders have been kind of asking me for presentation deck. And so I went through this and put it together. And keep in mind, right now I'm logged out of Google Chrome, right? So everything I'm showing you is stuff that's publicly available and you can find with just a few clicks if you know where to go. And so last night I drafted up the script of what I would say alongside the presentation. And so the reason that I was kind of thinking about this, and I've noticed that like some of the big names, I've seen them give the same speech more than like multiple times. And so I haven't given any speeches. I haven't presented Kermode once to a conference of people in a hall. I haven't really done it online either, really at all. So I've been pitching the story very hard, but it's been not with this kind of me talking in a camera. It's been me on the phone with people who are generally, involved in the business, and as my competition more so even than investors. I don't know 100 investors to call. A lot of, finding people to talk to has been another pain point. So there's been pain points around governance. There's been pain points around making content simple, but also deep enough for people to dig in and spend time themselves studying it. And it's also been there's been pain points just finding people, investor targets to talk to. And there's different partners that can do each of those things, kind of as legacy players in the junior mining business, but most of them we can't really afford to work with, which is frustrating. And most of them kind of think that we suck as well. And they're like, you don't have a website, Peter? And be like, okay, I don't have a website. Sure. Yeah, there's no web presence at all. That's right. And so rather than me read through a presentation deck, like read the script that I wrote, because that's what I would read to you. Right. And so for the sake of you guys and just jumping in and kind of showing you, I've used a lot of these Google Maps to kind of show like what results do we have? What's the projects actually look like? And where are these YouTube videos that we're seeing? Like, where is this stuff? Right. We've basically stopped updating this now, but we got up to, 125 videos. And it's starting to get out of date now because some of those projects we've dropped. And so there's an ongoing maintenance thing, but this is where we've found the discovery and had a permitting program go ahead. And so that's,
wait, are all these
kind of taken
are all these numbers, are all those numbers a YouTube video tagged to geolocation? Is that what you just showed?
Yeah. Yes. Correct.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So for example, video 116, new large quartz vein found with gold.
Traveling solo.
And so this is one of the many, many videos that we do with these guys. And the thing with them is that sometimes their videos cover a few locations. So it's kind of hard for them to be like, hey, we're at this location exactly, or this location exactly. So in the past, I've made these Google videos where I'm like, okay, shareholders see this video. They see some guy digging massive sulfide mineralization out of the side of a hill. That's exciting. But where is it? How does it connect with prior work at the project or other projects? What are the logistical constraints? Just run us through the whole reality check of everything about the project, right? And so that's what these videos are. We've been working with this crew since 2022, and you can find us in my first year as CEO. They actually helped us get drilling done, which was kind of impressive. And you can find that video, Backpack Drill at Copper Zone. This is back in 2022. Sorry, took over in 2021, and they helped me do this. We started working with them in 2022. And we've had all this copper that we've been finding on the South Island all the way up to Quadra up here. And so there's a bunch, and then there's stuff on the mainland as well. We've recently had to cut a bunch of these things because we're kind of like, we can't keep funding all the work on all of them. It's 50 or 100 grand a year plus of kind of ongoing expenditures to keep all the claims up. And we're like, we got to rationalize. So we've made some tough decisions about which projects to keep and which to get rid of. But yeah, so there's the presentation deck. There's a Google map of what other projects are there on Vancouver Island. Everybody says Vancouver Island, you'll never build a mine. Well, what do you want to hear about? Do you want to hear about the Vulcan Materials Company story? That's a $30 billion NYSE company. The historic Britannia mine, or our neighbor Nova Pacific, or ArcWest up in the north. Or tech is around, blah, 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 on and on it goes, right? And so this doesn't look like a website, but it is all of our content that we've been accumulating laid out in kind of a cohesive and systematic way. But that isn't necessarily public friendly, right? So this is almost what we've done is like we've come up with like what are our own internal data standards for all of our projects, and then how do we maintain those in a way that's not too cumbersome for our crews, because the guys making these YouTube videos are good at smashing rocks, but they're not so good at playing with computers, right? So how do we keep them in the field doing what they want to do while we're, you know, wrapping around them and doing all the corporate stuff that we have to do, right? And so that's why a lot of this is Google Drive based, Google Map based, is because it's really entry level software that anybody can use, you know, and they can do what I want them to do in terms of upload this or provide me with that. And there's a lot. So this is just an example of like one folder that I've made public recently where I started trying to answer shareholder questions when the guys are like, Peter, we see rocks like this, but we don't know what's going on. Can you help us? And it's like, yeah, let's do it. So we've got KMZ mapping files. We've got spreadsheets with all the results. We've got, you know, CSV files, just like a bit of it. I choose to assume that there are investors out here who care, but my experience has been such that it hasn't really been the case, sadly. I don't know if
question,
that's,
Peter.
I don't know if that's something I'm doing wrong or what the reason is, but. And then, for example, here too, we recently just had a bunch of people come up to site from Canadian Geological, and so there was like 20 or 30 people who came and had a look around the mountain, and I've got pictures in here from that. There's a bunch of other pictures of all of the projects. It goes on, right? And even just like if you click into the master for all the projects with the 911 guys, you know, these are all the different projects we have, and you have to kind of understand them enough to drill down and be like, what am I looking for, right? And so right there, we're kind of asking a lot of shareholders. And there are some people who maybe can wrap their heads around all this content and figure out what they care about and what they don't, but it's kind of, we've simplified it by just being like, let's just focus on the craziest high grade we can find and just showcase that to markets, because we're a very small company. We have a sub 1 million market cap right now. So rather than trying to advance 10 things, let's just show that we can competently advance one. And then, because we're missing so many pieces of the corporate team, as you can see, like, you know what I mean? Like this, because all this is me do it myself, digital content, geology, everything all at once, right? Where it's like, how do you juggle? And this is the first time I've ever made a pitch deck too, is just recently at the insistence of some investors. And so if you go back, there's this governance content, there's this project content, and then there's these kind of strategy. So deep dive, Newton deals. It's got all the news releases, and it's got all of these kind of like interviews that I've done. So again, we're logged out of Google Chrome here. This is just public information. This is all the news releases since I was CEO going back to 2021. There's a lot of them. It's interesting to go and study them and just be like, what is this guy doing? Why is he doing? And then to see if you can figure out if there's any rhyme or reason just from reading the news releases. And depending what you find, here's more. Or if, right? And so going back to the start, like one of the first things I did was like go through Rick Rule's questions for CEOs. Like he had a checklist of questions that he gives investors, and went through that and tried my best to answer it, you know, back in 2021 within the first couple months on the job as CEO, right? So that's content that I have made public on a kind of permanent basis. And there's stuff all the way through to 05/28. So this is at the end of May, where some guys had some conversations they were wondering about, and I made an audio note kind of summarizing my thinking. And so this is the raw transcript generated by my Google Pixel phone. It's not very good, and it needs to be edited. In the past, I did all that editing by hand, and it was a lot of time and effort. But then I tried putting it in ChatGPT, and yep, ChatGPT can summarize it really quick too. So there is a rabbit hole of content here to dive down in terms of what I'm doing and why. And then it may just look like two certain buttons, but you know what I mean? There's a lot there. And then the social media for the company and the directors, right? We can talk all about all these people, who they are, why we care. On and on it goes. And then just, you know, a couple things of like, send us a message and what's our phone number? How do you get in touch with us without actually, yeah, right? And so, and then again, the CDAR page is, I've tried to get them to put this as the link tree, but for some reason they won't use that. They say, no, it has to be a .com website or something. And so I don't know whether to just have a redirect or do something else in terms of trying to fix this corporate stuff. I don't know how much, again, how plugged into the corporate public market side of things you guys are, but there's all kinds of things like we got to change our auditor as well after the annual meeting, and just public company stuff that is an ongoing challenge. And yeah, so that's, if I could stop it there.